it's a series, and these are sort of some of the main characters. So I thought if I can nail it now, going forward, it'd be so much easier.
Yeah, I loved it. And I love that you sent me a big cast scene, like a scene with a ton of people in it, because those are the most fun. They're so fun to write. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the books. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about having cleaner transitions in your dialogue, which is giving that like kind of staccatoed topic change. Sorry, it's early. My mind is still waking up.
It's okay.
And then I want to talk about some tips to writing these big cast scenes, and kind of the difference for you between a big cast scene and a normal scene, right? Because there's some tricks that we use for like big cast scenes that are going to be different than you use in a normal scene. And then I also want to talk to you about the body language and like communicating emotions with body language.
Right.
And you had said you wanted to focus on the character voices.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I've had discussions before I've come on here, which about trying to use less dialogue tags so that and people know the characters by their voices, and that's what I found really hard. I mean, I've only been writing just over a year, so it's all very new.
Well, your writing is exceptional for somebody who's just been doing it for over a year. So you should be really proud of this piece. It's really great. And to tackle a big cast scene kind of this early in your career is fantastic. So
yeah, it's quite this book has been difficult to do, I think, for a couple of reasons. One is coming back after a break of having to homeschooling, although my children were back this week, so I was back to homeschooling.
Oh, that's congratulations.
So and having taken a break from writing 2 books and a novella, taking three months break, I guess, to edit the other books, market them, get the first book out there, and then come back, it was really hard. And then because it's where it's located, which is basically in a tented camp, I mean, there's lots of tents, there's only so much you can say about it. So setting of the scene is very hard, so a lot of it has to do with the people and trying to move it forward. I found the book, I've just about finished the first draft. I haven't quite got there yet, but it is definitely shorter. It's just over 50,000 instead of about 65,000, and I think a lot of it is because I think it's quite quick paced.
Okay.
Because of that.
Well, yeah, and mysteries and kind of thrillers usually are like, they kind of have that like beat to them of like next clue. So I think that's great. So we've got your main characters are Rose.
Yeah, she's the protagonist. She's 65.
Okay. And is her like, who would be your other main protagonist? Do you have another one, or is Rose and then like her cadre of friends?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So to start, I suppose it started with Rose and then Tait, because in the first book his mother's murdered, and that's the reason why she gets brought in to become an amateur sleuth, because he sort of persuades her to do so.
Okay. And then also in the scene we have Marina, who you said is
Marina. So Marina is Tait's potential love interest. She only appeared very briefly in the last book, and more in this book. And then I'm trying to think, I want to do NaNoWriMo, I want to get the next book written. So I'm already trying to set some pointers in this book to go forward into the next book. And so she will be there. That's why they're talking about going to a lodge, because I think it will be set in the lodge, which she will then be managing in the next book. So she's oh great, that's much easier for me to read.
Yeah, sorry, I want to look at it together, and I'm actually going to get rid of my notes here.
So she,
keep talking. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do this while we chat about.
Not at all. So she's 24. She is an Indian woman in Kenya, which is a topic which this book has been looking into as well, because it's about 4x4 cars and a particular team challenge, which is done every year for charity, and the Indians in Kenya get very, very involved in it. But it's quite an interesting thing, because then it's not particularly well known. They've got the Europeans, you've got the Africans, but the Indians now have become the 44th tribe.
Gotcha.
So she's there. She's representing, say, a different element of Kenyan culture and the Bhuti's potential love interest. But
Okay.
she is she's torn. Her parents want her to be a good Indian girl and get married and follow that route. But she's not really intelligent, so she wasn't able to go and do a doctor's degree or anything like that. But she's
Gotcha.
not sure what she wants to do. She's been doing temporary jobs, working in lodges and wildlife.
So she's kind of floating right
Yeah,
now.
she's trying to floating. She wants to set up some independence. She's not sure what to do. So this is her, I guess this is her trying to assert her independence and trying to find the right track that she goes on, or she wants to go on, and hopefully with the Bhiti, who is also floating as well, because his mother's been killed. He's had some problems at university. He's not sure he's doing the right thing anyway. So the two of them will probably, I haven't quite worked out in my mind what they're going to do, but they'll probably work forward together.
Okay. And then
then you've got Chloe. Who has been in since the first book, and she's sort of the third part of the triangle with Rose and Thabiti. She
Gotcha.
is in her late 30s, European, recently arrived from the UK. Her husband is away a lot with work, and she was used in my first book as a means of conveying the differences between Kenyan lifestyle and UK lifestyle.
Gotcha.
So she likes to be well dressed. She likes to like finer things in life. She finds it quite difficult when she's walking around town in her high heeled shoes, and she gets stuck in the potholes and the ruts and things and the dust that's flying about.
Okay. Okay,
and
I love
then
that.
You've got Sam, and he started off purely as a bit player in the first book as a barman. He just keeps coming back, and he's sort of like Rose's fairy godfather now. So whenever there's trouble, he appears. He's a huge bear-like man. You wouldn't mess with him. You wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley. But he's very gentle until provoked. But he's very strong. He's very smooth, slow talking.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's a great. You've got a great cast here. Something you noted, so when I sent you notes, something you noted was that my character descriptions didn't exactly line up with your descriptions. I don't want that to cause you any anxiety. That's totally okay. I read one scene out of multiple books. So how they're responding to each other in these scenes, I'm just taking a snapshot. So it's not like it's not like I should have used what I saw is what they are all the time. Right, like so. No. Yeah, just so I don't want you to panic and be like,
no,
"Oh no!"
No problem. No, but It was quite interesting what you did pick up, but didn't pick up because I mean, this is only my first draft. But it was like, right, yes, I can see that. So even those little pointers, it just really helps.
Yeah. So this is something. Whenever I want to know if I'm hitting a voice, right? What I do is I just come through and I highlight the words that particular character is saying, so I can see it pop out. So let's just do the first 2 pages of Rose. So let me ask, if you said Rose is your protagonist, she's 65. You said she's curious, she's a little nosy at times. What would you say if you could describe Rose with 2 adjectives? What besides nosy? Nosy's cheating because we just forthright. Okay.
And I'm going to say kind, but it's not kind as in a gentle way. It's understanding, I guess. It's understanding of human nature.
Okay, so kind of empathetic.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. It's the end of a long week for me, so I'm a bit like you. Can't quite find all the words.
No, I'm totally with you. And I'm just pushing to make sure I'm on the same page with you. Okay, so let's read just her sentences, right? Like we've got, who is that? So she starts off with a question, which is, the first thing a character says in the scene, especially if it's like the first chapter. Now this isn't, but if it was, that would really set the tone for the character in the reader's mind. So who is that's a nice way to like bring in her curiosity. She's asking about somebody who's walking away. So that's a nice way to bring in that curiosity. I really liked this line here. Rose squeezed Thabiti's shoulder because it gives that like really nice empathy that you're looking for, which I think is great. Yeah. So, and I actually wanted more of this. I wanted
Okay.
her like grabbing people's arm, not grabbing, but like, you know, comforting people to show that kind of like empathy, like I relate to you. And that physical touch is a really great way to do that, as long as it's not inappropriate. When it gets inappropriate, it
Yeah.
pulls away from empathy. And then this, you've learned to stand up for yourself. So again, like you're really nailing the empathy there, which is great. Like speaking back to him what he's done in an encouraging way is really good, especially since in this little paragraph here, what she's actually doing is pushing him to like take a step he doesn't want to take. So that like starting it off with a affirming encouragement is great. And then we can see her saying, I'm sorry to leave you, right? Like, so you're really hitting the empathy there too. Um, and Rose leaned back and said, I presume so, which is just kind of to move the conversation along. And then finally, she gives this long description of what she saw, which I liked. And so my question about this is this is a very kind of methodical description where she is like pegging things 1 second at a time, like reliving a scene. Is that kind of like methodical thinking part of her personality too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And it's how she solves the crimes, because she'll go back and there'll be something that she's seen. So there's actually something that she's missed out of here. It's just a very small thing.
Awesome.
And later on, she remembers that and she goes back to the scene and she says, now I understand.
Got it. So let's go back. So I think you've nailed Rose's voice, right? Like I think you've really done a great job. Like I reading this, you know, 1,500 words or so, I really felt like I knew who Rose was, and that's really great. So let's look at Tabidi real quick, because he's one that I think is just a little, can change a little bit different. So again,
I think that's Sam there, isn't it?
that is Sam. Sorry, I was looking for that first piece there where he says Tabidi's lips were pressed together in a
That's it.
slight
Yeah.
grimace. So, and this is something, part of this is stylistic,
Yes.
but
What's this? I couldn't quite understand this bit. Yeah.
yeah, so especially in a large cast scene, we want to get that like call and response separated in the paragraphs. So, do you know what I mean by call and response?
No. That's
Okay,
what I didn't
so
understand.
yeah, no worries. It's an American term, and it's actually a weird American Southern term. So it's I don't know why I would use it all the time. So call and response is a type of singing where there's like a song leader who calls
Yeah,
out the
yeah,
first line, and then
yeah,
the crowd like usually repeats it or
yeah.
responds. So that's that call and response, and we get that in dialogue a lot, where like one person is leading the dance. If you think of dialogue as a dance, one person is leading the dance and the other person's following, and then they'll shift, and one person will follow and the other person will lead. And so here, for example, you've got Tabidi leading the dance, right? His lips were pressed together in a slight grimace. So he's giving the call, and then Sam is going to address him, and
Right.
Sam is giving the response. So a lot of times I see authors doing this where they're putting the call and the response in the same line. And
Yeah, yeah.
what that does is it pulls the call, like it makes the call less important than the response. But Tabiti's physical motions here, which this is part of the dialogue, right? Like
Oh,
he's
okay.
non-verbally saying something. So we just pull it down. And
So just looking at that then. So non-verbal responses you almost think of as like a separate line of dialogue. So that's why you keep it separate.
yeah,
Or
and again, it's stylistic. Not everybody does that, but especially in a big cast. So the problem with big cast scenes is that characters get lost,
Mhm.
right? Like you forget that people are at the table.
Yeah.
And as a writer, it's really important that we let everybody have a turn.
Yes.
in a big cast scene. Like everybody needs their turn to participate, and we want to keep it as like it's not going to be fair necessarily where you're going to be like everybody needs 5 exchanges, but it is going to be like we want to make sure nobody's getting lost in the scene unless they're like a quiet and shy character who we intentionally want to get lost in the scene. So, but Sam would be the closest character you have for that, and he's pretty engaged in this
He would
conversation.
sit back and he would let a conversation go, and then he would only come in if he thought he could add value to it. He wouldn't be chatting.
And I think that's what I think you did that well. I think Sam lays back until it's time for him to speak. I will say he's more antagonistic in the conversation than maybe his personality usually is, which isn't a bad thing. It's just the role he's playing in this conversation.
Think about, okay.
But yeah, so all that to say, separating this dialogue, separating this nonverbal out allows the reader to see that he's still participating in the dialogue, that he's still participating in the room. So because especially here where you're going to have a call response call, like where you've got Tabiti's lips are pressed together in a slight grimace. Sam addressed him. You look less enthusiastic about the proposal. Tabiti looked up. It happened rather quickly, right? Like, so you've got this, like, Sam is probing him for a question. So let's go ahead and separate his first statement out at the top and then let Sam respond and then bring his second statement down. Yeah. So does that make more sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, I know how to do that now. That's good.
Okay. Let's go back to his voice. So I'm highlighting everything Tabiti says on this first page in blue. And he's got 3 good lines here, so we can actually just look at these 3, I think. So first we've got Tabiti's lips were pressed together in a slight grimace. So to me, that communicates kind of frustration and guardedness. Tabiti looked up at him. So now I'm understanding that Tabiti was looking down, so he's kind of in his own head. It happened rather quickly. 1 minute I was eating a muffin, and the next, Pearl and I are joining Marina to tend to the wishes of overprivileged and filthy rich family in their new safari lodge. So this also communicates to me that he kind of has a chip on his shoulder, right? Because there's that like class warfare conversation happening here, overprivileged and filthy rich family, which just communicates something about his worldview.
Yeah, I suppose so. I hadn't thought about it too much, but yeah, okay, yes.
Yeah. And then this last line, Tabiti pinched his nose and closed his eyes. I told you, I find it hard being around strange people. If they start telling me what to do or get annoyed with me, I know I'll shrink into my shell and be of little use. So again, we have this kind of like, I feel, I find it hard being around strange people. And then at the end, he says he's going to shrink in his shell. So as you're like communicating who Tabiti is, my reading on him is that he's kind of a curmudgeon. Because a curmudgeon, like a grumpy old man. Because with no physical descriptors, right? Like he's pinching his nose, he's closing his eyes, his lips are pressed together. These are all really great physical manifestations. They don't necessarily communicate to me anxiety.
Okay.
Anxiety can communicate this way, but this is more like frustrated anxiety.
I think he's frustrated because the previous, of course, it's so difficult because you're just taking a snapshot, aren't you?
I'm just taking a snapshot. Yeah.
He was just having a conversation with Marina in the previous scene, and somebody, the Ollie who's disappeared at the beginning, came and offered Marina a job, and suddenly Tabiti finds out that he's going to go and help her do it, and he's like, I'm not sure I want to. So, but he's annoyed with himself because he didn't stand up and say no at the time. So.
Gotcha.
I think it probably, I'm really pleased you picked it out. I think it works for what I want it to do in this scene. I don't think that wouldn't be like that for the rest of the book. So.
Gotcha. And I would add, so when Tabiti's anxiety starts to press down on him, does he get angry or passive?
Passive, I would say.
Okay. So because we all have different responses to anxiety, right? Like we all have there's a lot of different ways you can respond to anxiety. The way you're describing him to me, he feels more passive. And so I'm glad. I would just add some words here that communicate that passivity, right? So Tabithi's lips were pressed together in a slight grimace, and he looked down at his lap. Right,
Right.
like the
Okay.
refusal to make eye contact demonstrates the like I'm going into my shell, and I don't want to participate in this. Tabitha looked up at him and then looked away. Right, like people who are anxious and passive don't want to engage.
Yeah,
So
that's perfect.
yeah, so make eye contact and then look away. Right, like because it shows like I'm responding to what you're saying, but then I don't actually want to engage with you.
Yeah.
Tabitha pinched his nose and closed his eyes. So now this has a different ring to it. If we have him looking away up here and looking down up here, now when he's closing his nose and his eyes, it feels like he's trying to escape. And that I find it being hard to be around strange people is going to read more as shyness than frustration.
Yeah, I think this is the I think this is the, hopefully it comes as this is the reasoning behind his frustration before. So in the first book he was very shy, and that's why he couldn't investigate by himself. So he's come out of his shell a bit, but I think he's just trying to make the point. This is the way I am still. I'm not quite out there.
Yeah, a lot of times something you may want to think about in scenes like this is giving him something to fiddle with. So a
Okay.
lot of times like passive anxious people, myself being one, you can see I'm fiddling with something right now. A lot of times passive anxious people
My oldest
will
is that.
direct their nervous energy into an object. So giving him like something to play with, something to fiddle with, like something to kind of toy with. And it doesn't have to be something he has with him all the time. Like if he's sitting at a table, I have him looking down and like playing with a spoon,
Yeah.
swirling a spoon in his fingers. Because it's that like the thing about anxiety is like a storm inside of us. And but it doesn't come out, it comes out differently. So for some people that storm's going to come out as like a rage. For some people that storm is going to come out as like an intense need to control. For Tabitha, it sounds like that storm is going to come out as he's going to try to bottle it up and stuff it deep down so nobody can ever find it. And so you need him taking that energy that he has going on inside and like channeling it into something. Right.
Okay. Right.
So like if he's in a car, he's probably playing with the buttons on the door. Right? Like if he's walking, he probably has his hands in his pockets. Right? Like these descriptors.
I've got him stuffing the ground on quite a few occasions when he's sort
Yeah.
of frustrated.
Yeah, like these descriptors that like bring him, like you almost want to like, so a lot of times when I'm writing a character voice, especially in a big cast scene, I try to come up with like a physical manifestation of the character just to remind myself kind of like, okay, how is this character going to come off? And it'll like, what I love about your piece is that each character has a very distinct voice, right? Like I could tell you're right. I can tell who's talking by how they sound, which is beautiful.
Great, because that's what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, especially in a scene like this, which is really hard, where you're giving a lot of information, right? Like, so you're reviewing a crime scene, which is like, there's all these things, these details that have to come out, right? And you've done a really great job of putting them out with these little like physical manifestations of like Tabitha pinched his nose and closed his eyes. Rose squeezed Tabitha's shoulder. Marina jumped enthusiastically, right? Like if I'm just rolling through, if I'm not reading anything else, but the like physical manifestations of what they're saying before they speak, or like Rose turned to Chloe. Oh, such an empathetic thing, right? Like to turn and face somebody. It's really great. Sam's tone was somber is also another really great kind of line in there that's like communicates. And so like if we're comparing the difference between Sam and Marina jumped enthusiastically, Sam's tone was somber. So you're getting, sorry, I can't say that word this morning. You're getting that like different personalities in the room, and you've done a really great job of that. So all that to say, the key is to make sure that like you're hitting, the personalities are coming out how you want them to. And so I would keep Tabidi. So yeah, going back to what I was saying, a lot of times I'll try to find like a physical manifestation of somebody to help me remember their voice. Right. So like if I wrote a passive anxious character for a simulation I was working on, and literally before I'd write his voice, I'd just do this just for a second, and then I'm ready to go.
Yes.
Right. Like, because just that physical manifestation of like, oh my gosh, I'm scared and I want to keep everything inside. Now I'm in the mental state to like write his voice. In a big scene like this, if you read it and you feel like one of them isn't standing out, I'd highlight their just their words like this. And like, you know, you can see we're talking about it. It's taken us 20 minutes. This is like a 5-minute exercise. Highlight their words and then just read their voice and make sure it's coming across the way you want it to come across. Just a cheap trick, right? To like make sure a scene sounds how you want it to seem. I wouldn't do this with a whole book because that would drive yourself crazy. But I would do it. Like sometimes I'll do this like right after I write a scene. I'll just like pop their voices out and see like, did that scene hit how I wanted to hit? Yeah. So, that's Tabidi and Rose and the scene. Was there another character you specifically wanted to talk about?
You said you couldn't get Chloe at all.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was going to bring up. I can't get Chloe. So let's look at Chloe. So I'm pulling back up the edited version so I can find her. So here we have Chloe smiling. I'm sorry to left you. Have you been okay? And then later in the piece, Chloe ran her hand through her hair. So now that I know that Chloe has this kind of like debutante, rich girl thing, this makes more sense. I did not understand what you're doing with this physical motion. I was like, why is she running her hands through her hair? But now I understand that she's like fixing her hair. I get that.
But actually, I suppose in this scene, she's probably one of the characters who just sort of comes in. She's not probably one of the main characters in it. So
yeah, and then here we have her scowling, Chloe's scowl, wearing the medical tent. So already we've got these 3 actions for her. She's running her hand through her hair, which seems like if she's fixing her hair, seems that she's kind of distracted. She's scowling here, and then here she's smiling.
okay,
Right?
so it
Like,
doesn't quite fit.
yeah, so you can feel the like tension between the 3. And I actually added, no, Rose is smiling. I'm sorry, that's not Chloe smiling. Where was Chloe?
But those are things to check. So
yeah, so here we go. Chloe appeared and stood next to Rose. That's what I was saying. So she joins Rose here, and then she's scowling and she's running her hands through her hair. Is the first 3 things I meet her with. And so the question is like, how do you want her, if we're talking about the cast of characters, you've got like strong silent Sam, inquisitive empathetic Rose, anxious Tabidi, enthusiastic Marina. How do you want, if you were to describe Chloe with a single adjective, how would you describe her?
I was going to say a bit ditzy, but I'm not sure that is quite what it is. I mean, debutante was sort of a good word probably, because she's
so maybe like ritzy with an R, like that doesn't necessarily describe a personality though. Like what's a ritzy personality? Doesn't really help. Maybe stuck up.
She's not quite, I can't really see because I've got all my notes on Scrivener where I've sort of written down.
Yeah, so she's not stuck up. I hear you saying.
She's not stuck up. She's
she privileged
in a different way.
She's anxious, but in a different way.
Yeah, because she's much more outgoing. She's more of an outgoing person, but she's in a very alien environment, and she's struggling to cope slightly in that alien environment.
How is she dealing with that change in environment? Is she, so I'm just going to throw some words at you and tell me the one that hits the most. Is she overly outgoing to compensate for being with strange people? Or is she trying to impress everyone around her? Or is she trying to control her situation by being perfect?
The first one.
The first one. So
Yeah.
she's overly, she's like life of the party, trying to make sure everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Okay. I would change her voice in a scene like this, then to be focused on other people. So this is great. Has anyone seen or spoken to Jono? Because she's looking for someone else, right?
Yeah.
I may not have her run her hand through her hair. I might have her look around the room.
Okay.
Right? Like she needs to be busy.
Yes.
If
Yes.
she's concerned about other people, she's got to be busy. She's got to be moving, right? Have her moving around the table. Have her get people coffee. Have her like, you know, pick up something that's on the floor and put it back on the table, right? Like she's fixing things. She's busy. She's moving around. I'd never have her scowl.
No. Okay.
Because scowl is disapproval, and
Yeah.
you don't want her disapproving of until you really like, I said you don't want her disapproving of things until you really need her to. So like this is an expression you want to keep in your pocket until you really want the reader to like be like, oh, why is Chloe upset? Right? Like, so we don't want her scowling until she really needs to. So I might give her you want her leaning into conversations a lot, right? Maybe pulling up a chair here. So that like leaning in is a sign of engagement. Leaning back is a sign of thoughtfulness or guardedness, right? Like, so when somebody leans into a conversation, they're getting ready to like jump into it. When somebody leans back in a conversation, they're like separating themselves a little bit. They're putting physical distance between what's happening in themselves. So you might want her leaning in a lot. You might want her like touching people's arms, not grabbing.
Quite touchy.
What'd you say?
I think she could be quite touchy. I think that would
Yeah.
work.
And you want her like doing it in like a so you have Rose empathetically like how do we say it up here? um I can't remember. Squeezing his shoulder.
Yeah.
You don't want her squeezing shoulders. You want her like patting.
Yeah.
Right? Like that fun, like you and me, we're in this together, right? Like, so that kind of like patting people's arms, tapping people, a quick rub of the shoulder, right? Not a squeeze, but like a quick rub, like, giving her those like quick actions. You may want her, something that communicates that she's trying to like spruce up the group as like a way of belonging is having her like almost motherly, like cleaning up things for people, like fixing one of the guys' collars or like offering somebody lipstick, right? Like those kinds of things where she's like trying to improve the people around her, which is not empathetic. It's more of a reflection on yourself. That like these people reflect on me. So you want to give her that kind of like those kinds of physical manifestations. Now, a large group scene like this, that's really hard because you don't have a lot of space to do that. But if you can do it in the smaller scenes, like if you have scenes where it's just like her and two other people,
Yeah.
and she's doing a lot of that, it'll be easier that way. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's really interesting, and that's a real way that she can then be set apart.
Yeah, and that's the goal, is to have them all stand apart.
Because you were saying one thing, I think you said on the notes, was it in such a big scene like this, you almost have to emphasize the differences in the characters so that people understand who's speaking.
Yeah. So, and this is another, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to head there next too. So this is great writing in a 2-person or 3-person scene. If Meyer was asleep, the killer would have been able to sneak up on him and catch him unaware, which would be a huge advantage, mused Rose. right? Like that's nice in a smaller scene, but with 5 people around the table, I don't know who's saying this until I'm, a
Yeah.
full sentence in. So for a large group scene, I'd recommend just bumping that to the beginning. Thinking out loud, Rose said, if Myra was asleep. And that way they know, if you think of it as like a game of hot potato, where the kids are like, music's playing and the kids are like passing the ball to each other and nobody wants to be left holding it. You want to, when the music stops, you want to think of that like tossing the ball back and forth in this large group scene where they're like throwing the ball to each other. So every time somebody else speaks, you almost want them to be like, and he caught it. And then the next, like, and then he says something, as he says it, he's throwing the ball and she caught it. Right. Like, so you want that, like, to be clear who's catching the conversational ball.
Yeah.
Because what we don't want is the readers having to pause and go back and figure out who said what. Right, like we don't want to make our reader read something twice. So in a
So
big
it's an easy way of putting the dialogue tags in, or the action is to put them at the beginning, and that will help.
Yeah, and in a 2-person, 3-person scene, or like a normal sized scene, that can get really frustrating. Right, like if the dialogue tag is always at the front, the reader's like, oh, this is so repetitive. But in a large group scene like this, it's way more necessary. It's also more necessary, like you were saying, to exaggerate everybody's personality a little bit just to make them stand out. And I'm not saying that, like, all of a sudden your excitable character Mariana needs to be like dancing in the background. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, like, we want to make sure that voices are clear, and that they're if you're boiling them down to that 1 or 2 adjectives, that those adjectives are really coming across, right? So to complicate it, to kind of take it to the next level for you too, so we all have adjectives that describe our normal voice, and then we all have adjectives that describe our voice as anxiety increases or as we become more comfortable. So in this scene, there's this point where they disagree about what is suffocation, because Sam says maybe they suffocated him, and then you've got these other characters discussing whether or not that's actually even possible. So if we think of the emotional flow of the scene, everything's pretty neutral, right? And then they start helping Rose figure out what's going on. So we have a little bit of raise of anxiety, and now there's going to be a dip in the energy level because they're disagreeing with each other. So whoever's being disagreed with, which would be Sam, needs to become a little defensive. And so his adjective should change. So if his adjective is like strong and stoic, we want to move it to like, we don't want to get rid of the strong, but we may want to move the stoic to defensive. And the question is, like, in that emotional move where Sam is becoming more defensive, how does that impact the rest of the group when Sam becomes defensive? Like, do they think it's funny? Which I don't think this group would, but do they think it's funny? Are they concerned? Are they apologetic? Like, his change in tone, how does that change everybody else in the big cast? And in big cast scenes, like, kind of the more advanced level of writing is taking into account how they're changing each other. So, right, we've got Tabidi here. Browse was still wrinkled, but how, I don't understand, he was suffocated, right? Then we have Sam looking on. Sam, well, so this is another thing, but we have Sam looking at Tabidi with, I'll come back to this in a second. We have Sam looking at Tabidi with pity. And then him saying, I could lean on him. So Sam looking at Tabidi with pity is kind of like, oh, you're so dumb. Is that how we want a quiet, stoic character responding when he's challenged? It could be. It just changes his personality a little bit. So I wouldn't have him look at Tabidi with pity. I might have him cross his arms,
Okay.
right? Like, yeah, I could, cross his arms and shrug. I could lean on him.
Yeah.
Right. Like, or you might have him like, sorry, off the top of my head, the warning is never great. You might have him like make a gesture, like I could lean on him, like throw his arm out, in a like expression of like, well, this is it. You might have him, this would be a good place to scowl, right? You might have him scowl at Tavini. Like, how dare you challenge me and what I just said? I said this thing, and you're supposed to say, "Oh, brilliant, Sam, way to go!" Right? Like, you could have him mumble to himself, right? Like maybe he disengages. He's like, "Well, I could lean on him." It's lying, right? Like, so you could have him like say it to himself rather than to Beatty, right? Like, so something, but all that to say, like, that interaction, what's beautiful about a big cast scene is that you get this like super energy from that emotional dynamic moving, right? Like as the emotional dynamic of the group changes, it creates this energy in the conversation that's so much fun to watch, right? Like, it's why I think when we watch like comedies on TV and in movies, they're usually like big cast comedies, because the characters are all like playing off of each other, and that playing off of each other brings this like energy to the scene that gets super exciting as we go. So all that to say, put in these moments where the tone is changing is a time to really like dig in and like exaggerate even a little bit more their personalities. So like in a big cast scene, we want to ramp their personalities up a little bit. And then when that tone starts to change, we want to ramp it up just a little bit more, because it creates that energy that's fun for them to play off of one another.
So the homework sort of is to have what's the normal 2 adjectives to describe a normal situation, and then as that you go to more anxious or more comfortable, more excited, how that changes slightly, and then you can be easier to feed in or to think about it when I'm writing.
Yeah, so I would say homework. That's great.
So you tell I've been homeschooling this week.
No, you and I are going to be good friends. I love that you just asked for homework, and that you're now my favorite person. I love homework so much. So I have an inappropriate love of homework. I'm always telling, whenever I go to therapy, I'm always telling my therapist at the end of the session, she's like, "All right, so we had a good talk." And I'm like, "What's my homework? What do I have to do? Between now and next session, what am I doing?" But yeah, so she's always like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "No, homework is assigned."
No.
Yeah, so sorry. But yeah, so sorry, I'm going to back off of that for a second, because I would say part of that depends how much you need for each character. Part of that depends on how much you're going to use them. So let me
book
ask
3 and hopefully book 10, probably quite a bit throughout.
Nice.
So.
I love long series. It's so great. So do you ever write from any of their other perspectives, or is it always Rose as the main?
So this one, I did 2 because I'm just such a learner. So the first book, I think I did 2 that I did from Thabiti's perspective, because I needed sort of
Sure.
the moment where it was. And actually, again, there's 2 scenes, 2 or 3 scenes here, which are his perspective, and then completely bizarrely, there's then his sisters coming in a completely different scene, and she's going from a complete mental nutcase to this strong girl who might even have her own book or her own spin-off at some stage. So I am trying to develop out the characters as I go.
Okay, so what I would say is, for side characters like Sam, who may never get a perspective, you need 3 adjectives, right? You need normal Sam, or you need 3 descriptions, and I'd keep those descriptions to just a couple adjectives to keep it easy, right? Because like, you're talking 5 characters here across 10 books. You're going to get to know them really, really well, and like really kind of fall in love with some of them, and some of them you're going to get tired of writing. So, all that to say, keep it simple, right? Like, you don't want to weigh yourself down with a ton of baggage. Like, if you think about 10 books as the journey you're on, you don't want to like be carrying a whole house full of information. about every character, right? Like keep it simple. So Sam, we want like 2 to 3 adjectives that
Yeah.
describe his personality. And then you want like Sam angry, or
Yeah.
Sam challenged, or Sam anxious. And then you want like Sam happy. So you're talking like 5 adjectives total. Normal Sam, strong and stoic. Sam angry, defensive. Sam happy, boisterous, which I know that's not a good adjective for Sam, but you know, just to like throw it out there. Or like Sam happy might be like content,
Yes.
right? Like you want like that. Or like, so Marina, who we haven't really talked about, but like Marina, normally if she's not a character you're going to tell a lot of perspective from, she's just more like a partner to Beatty. Then like you want Marina like excitable and energetic, and sometimes I'll even use a phrase like I might put in quotes like, I'm just happy to be here, right? Like whatever the phrase that comes to mind when you say her. And then like, you know, Marina anxious or angry, you might have like disappointed and uncomfortable. And then like Marina happy, you might have like enthusiastic, right? Like, so you're just giving yourself that, like, here's the base and then here's how they're going to change a little bit.
Yeah, brilliant.
For main characters, you want more.
Yeah, okay.
For Rose and Tabidi, you really do want to know them, right? So you want to know, like, you want to get more emotional states for them than just like good and bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like you want like, what's Rose like when she's vulnerable? What's Rose like when she's in pain? How does she respond to pain? Right? Like, so I'll actually do what I call a wheel for a character like Rose, where like I have her main, I'll draw it and I'll put it somewhere where I can see it when I write. And there was a season where I was actually like writing in coffee houses and stuff. I'd put it in my notebook. I always carry a notebook with me, so I'd like put it.
I like that. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd put it in my notebook and I'd have the page dog-eared. So right before I was going to write, I'd just take it out and I'd look at the picture and be like, okay, I got it. And then I can put it back. And it sometimes looking at the picture will feel silly because you're going to, by book 9, you're going to know Rose so well. You're not going to need to look at it, but it's just about keeping you grounded.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so, and it'll become a ritual that helps you get into writing. So I'm also about rituals that help us overcome our anxiety for writing, right? Like, so if we can build some rituals into like, you know, I tend to take my shoes off before I write. It's just a ritual that like prepares me emotionally and mentally to be like, okay, now I'm going to write. Like some people will be like, oh, I have to have my snacks, or I have to have my drink, or I have to have like my right chair. All of those are just rituals that are like helping us overcome the anxiety we have to like put words on page. So a helpful ritual is glancing at your character wheel or your character description before you write. Even if you're not reading it, it's just the idea of like, okay, I'm now in character to write this person. So yeah, so you want more for your main character. So I do a little bit more for Tahiti and Rose. And what I'd actually do, since you're on book 3, right, you're not creating these characters from scratch. So what I'd actually do is as you write them, I would build this.
Yeah. Okay.
So like, don't stop and go back, because you already know subconsciously who these characters are, right? You've written them for, you know, on the low end, 150,000 words, right? Like, so you know them. So, you know, start building it now so that you don't lose them by book 9. Yeah, so I would say that's your homework, is start building those character things, especially when you're in this big cast scene. For this scene specifically, you lose characters at the end of the scene, which is common in big cast scenes because we get so excited about getting through the plot that we forget that characters are disappearing. So you'll notice in the notes, there's some places where I started giving lines to other people.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Like you had like rows coming in a lot, and I just started passing those lines out to others, like give this line to this person and this line to this person. Cause you do want to make sure like in that game of passing that ball back and forth, like we were talking about earlier, you do just want to make sure that nobody's like sitting over in the corner, like, oh, I don't get to play. Like, so you want everybody playing in a big cast scene. So for this specific scene, I'd read through and just make sure, check your descriptions and check how your characters are talking. Right, like here at the end, Chloe's clasping her hands together. Does that communicate? Like, yeah, I actually think that works, but you just want to come through and check and make sure that your character's physical responses and the language they're using actually matches who they are. And you might need to edit that a little bit. A lot of times I won't save that for a late edit. Like, I'm one of those people that like starts writing a book and I write my vomit draft all the way through. I don't stop and go back and edit. But what I will do is when I finish a scene, I'll do a quick check like this and I'll just read it once. I'm not like editing a ton for language and stuff. I'm just looking like, did that big cast scene actually work? Because and if you get whatever your process is, if you're an editor as you write, great. You can.
I am more like that, to be honest.
Okay, great. There's no right or wrong. It's just whatever works for you. So yeah, so you may want to just edit that through and look to make sure everybody is working, right? Like this is nice here. I didn't notice this before, but Taviti checking his watch, talking about things he can play with. Man, his watch is something he could play with a lot. To like get that anxiety, that bottled up anxiety, give it somewhere to go. A watch is one of those things that people will just play with.
I should be watching when I go out now. I'll be seeing what people play with when I'm out and about.
It's a
Apart
great
from
exercise.
Face
It's a
mask.
great exercise. Yeah, especially people you know. So this is something. This is a weird homework assignment, but you might enjoy it. To understand people, right? Because when we're writing, what we're really talking about is like, how do I understand these characters on a deep human level? Something artists do. Like I remember when I was a kid, I was in high school, so I was like 16 or 17. I got to take a trip to Amsterdam with my father, and I went to I had a whole day by myself in Amsterdam, and I went to the Van Gogh Museum. And there in the museum, they had his sketchbooks. And I always thought of Van Gogh as this like impressionist painter who it was more about the feeling than the actual detail, but his sketchbooks were super detailed. And they were like, he's like 50 pages of him trying to draw a hand and just try to figure out like how to draw somebody's hand. And the like little plaque explained that he used to sit in the town square by a fountain and draw people as they passed. And so as writers, like we're drawing personalities and we're drawing like character expressions. So something sometimes I'll find myself doing is that like if I'm at a family party and I know everybody in the room really well, I just watch them. And I just watch their actions and I watch what they're doing. And I watch their, like how they laugh and what they're doing with their hands and how they're standing. Because then I can match those physical traits to the personalities I want to write. Right. Like, yeah. So that's a more like long-term homework assignment is start paying attention to the people around you. It's a beauty. I promise one in your life. And so like watching that person and being like, yeah, this person is pretty close to who I'm writing, watching that person and starting to watch the physical manifestations of their personality will bring a lot of depth to your work. It's a paper I was reading recently had the quote, every human relationship can be boiled down into a series of conversations. Right. Like, so when we're writing a piece like this, where people are talking, what we're doing is we're like communicating to the reader this is their relationship with one another, right? Like if we take that statement and take the inverse of it, if every human relationship can be boiled down into a series of conversations, then every conversation is an expression of a human relationship. So what we're doing is we're like taking this group and we're letting the reader into their relationships with one another in these like big cast scenes. So all that to say, you know, the more we can pop their personalities, the more fun it is for the reader. And so, yeah, just as a homework assignment, like getting these realistic descriptions of what's happening is really good.
And do
Sorry,
you like the sort of more the moving type descriptions, rather than people just raising eyebrows, but people actually doing things, a bit more a sort of energy to it?
I'm glad you said that. Let's talk about what I don't like first. Sorry, I'll find one. Here we go. Sam, you originally wrote, Sam took pity on Tabidi.
Of course. Well, how do you know? Because you're in Moses' head, so you wouldn't really know that.
Yeah, and like, don't like even if
Sorry, my editor hasn't seen it. She'd have picked that up straight away.
Yeah, no. So even if I'm not in Rosa's head, like even if it's third person omniscient, and I'm just kind of like seeing everything, like don't tell me.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. Yeah.
Show me, right? Like, so that's what I don't like. For what I do like, it depends. It depends on what kind of writer you are. You are doing really great with these physical movements. This is clearly a strength in your writing. So lean into it.
Okay.
Yeah, lean into it. You're doing really well with these. So they're very diverse. They're very character specific, right? Like when we're talking about like body motions, what we're looking for, they're diverse, they're character specific, they're communicating emotion. So you're doing really great with these. And I just keep going at it. If somebody finds themselves like, so if we were talking to somebody that wasn't you, who wasn't doing great with these, and they find themselves constantly like he put his hands in his pockets, she put her hands in her pockets, he put his hands in his pockets again, oh wait, they're already there, he took his hands out of his pockets and put them back in his pockets, right? Like if somebody just can't, because there are a lot of writers who just, this isn't their skill, then I would lean into something else. I'd lean into the adjectives you're using that describe how they're saying things. I might lean into like the number of words you're using and like, making the word choices extremely different for the characters. But your physical manifestations are so great that they're really helping bring out the character personalities. So I just lean into them, just go at them hard. Because they're good. All right, let me make sure we talked about everything.
I think the thing was about the wording of the staccato effect, because I found that really interesting.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you said that.
Going through and in my sort of journey of learning craft, very much it has been like, get rid of all the unnecessary words. So you don't say stood up because someone obviously stood up, someone just stood. But then yours is very much, well, actually, add back some of those joining, make it flow a little bit more. And I found that really interesting.
Specifically in conversational piece. Sorry, I'm looking for it. Do you remember where it was on the page?
I think
here we go. This is a little choppy. So page 1.
Yeah.
So you originally had.
No, there's one higher than that. Keep going up.
Oh, is there?
See if we find a little bit one earlier on. Was there? How far?
Grab strong words, feel aggressive.
Or maybe I'm wrong.
Go ahead, slow down the connection. Let the reader.
I know, maybe it was that one.
Yeah, so there's a stuttering happening here. So yeah, so these are two different things. So let's take them both, right? Because this is about slowing down for emotional flow.
Yeah.
Or for not emotional flow. This is about slowing down for emotional impact. Down here is the staccato, transitions where I want you to add more words. So up here, let's talk about this. Marina grabbed Rose's arm. And originally you wrote, Marina grabs Rose's arm. Sorry, our new temporary boss, Tabidi and I have offered months work looking at a luxury home at a lodge in Borneo. So you had it, sorry, our, new temporary boss.
Yeah.
And it read like a typo to me. And so what I want to do is just slow it down so that the reader can feel that like self-catch Marina's doing. So like Marina grabbed Rose's arm, my period, sorry, period, our new temporary boss.
Right, yeah.
Right, so put those hard stops in there so that we can feel it. It's terrible grammar, but because my period is not a sentence, but it gives, there's moments, especially when we have these like moments where like we don't speak with good grammar, as that sentence right there is a great indication of. We don't like the way we speak does not match the way we write. So when you're inside the dialogue tag, you want to give yourself the freedom to like pause and stop that. This is going to be super important in intimacy and scenes of great emotional distress.
Okay.
So the more anxious we become, the more the less we can put words together, right? So we may use more words, we may use less words, but they're gonna be less connected in an appropriate way. So like if you have a scene where Rose is like pushed to her limit and she's crying, you don't want her speaking in full sentences.
Sorry, say that again. You don't want to speak in full sentences.
Yeah, if she's in a scene where she's like pushed to her limit and she's like heartbroken, you don't want her speaking. You want her sentences chopped, and you want them slow, and you want them like small, because it resembles how she's feeling. If she's in a high tense scene, like let's say there's like a fight scene where she's like telling somebody to put down the gun, right? Like you don't want her being like, okay, what I really need you to do right now is take that gun and place it on the table and everything's going to be okay. You want her saying like, just put it down. Just put it down, right? Like repeated phrases in high moments of anxiety work. That actually goes all the way back to like biblical literature, like in the Bible, you know, the angels will be like, holy, holy, holy. And it's supposed to be like the most holy of all time, right? Like, so because that repeated like holy is the way that they express more. We do that when we talk, right? Like, so if she's telling somebody to put down a gun, you want to be like, put it down. You want to be like, just put it down. Just put it on the table. Just put it down. Right? Like, cause like the repetition of those phrases creates that expression of anxiety that's going on inside of her. So don't worry, like when we get to like expressing emotion, because here Mariana's catching herself. And so just let the reader know she's catching herself by like providing that expression of emotion where she's like, oh, sorry. And just that like little catch. So does that make sense? So like, and to sum up, like inside the dialogue tags, you can let grammar go a little bit.
Good, because I have no idea about grammar anyway. So
excellent, perfect. Yeah, so inside the dialogue tags, let it go a little bit and write more how it sounds than how it should look. And then especially when you're getting into high emotional scenes, like when the emotions are high, grammar's gonna, inside the dialogue tags, grammar's gonna break down even more. So this is something different down here at the bottom. So originally you wrote Rose squeezed Tabithi's shoulder. You have to learn to stand up for yourself. Your mother can't shelter you from the world, and you have Pearl to protect. This will be a great opportunity to gain some independence and consider what you want with your life. You can begin by learning how to deal with people, but it will be in small doses. I think Mariana will take on the bulk of the face-to-face work. So you're getting a ton of information out here. And it's super encouraging. It just doesn't sound like someone talking. Right. It sounds like a technical essay. Right? Which is really well written. So like just to say, like if you're writing a technical essay and you're writing like a persuasive piece to Tabiti and you're writing it down, these are great thesis sentences that like you might want to build paragraphs off of. But when we talk, we make these weird connections to what's going on. We use lots of ands and besides and alsos, and you know what I'm saying, right? Like we try to relate when we speak. So you have to so I added some words in here just to make it smoother. And specifically making it smoother around transitions where she's changing her thought, because she gives like 4 thesis statements in here. You have to learn to stand up for yourself. Your mother can't shelter you anymore. You have Pearl to protect. This is a good opportunity. You can begin learning how to deal with people. Oh, this is a good opportunity. I think Marina will help. So we've got 5 thesis statements here, and we just want to smooth in between each one. So you have to learn to stand up for yourself. Your mother can't continue, so I added continue to shelter anymore from the world. And then I put in, this is the real important first one, and comma, you have Pearl to protect, besides comma, this is a great opportunity, right? Like, so giving words that allow that transition in thought, right? Like in the sentence, and comma Pearl, to show that she's like giving a new thought, give her a period, give her another transition, besides comma this will, like just to smooth it out. It's not great technical writing. Those words are extra words that, like, if we were writing a technical piece, I'd totally cut, like take this all out. But because she's speaking, we just want to add in a few of these transitions, right? Like just to make it feel smoother and more rambly.
Yeah, this was another one.
Yeah, I did it again down here.
Yeah.
Originally you had exactly, Ollie mainly wants you to deal with the new electrical equipment. I would really appreciate you helping out. Who knows, it might be fun. So we got 3 transitions there, or 2 transitions, 3 main thoughts. Yeah, so exactly, I just went ahead and put a period, because and the reason I put a period here is because this is Mariana talking, and she's speaking enthusiastically. So exactly, right? Like we just want it like that hard, like pop. Ollie wants you to deal with the new electrical equipment, and then I put anyway, right? Like adding that like transition between exactly and anyway, and then putting in and comma, I would really appreciate you helping me out, right? To create that transition in thought. Because she's saying what Ollie wants to do, and now she's saying what she wants to do. So create that tradition of thought, period. Besides, comma, who knows, it might be fun, right? Like and another transition in thought. So I would say the way to catch this in your writing is read it out loud to yourself. And if it doesn't sound like someone talking, you need more transitions in there.
Yeah.
That's the easiest
way.
I
haven't done that yet. I usually try and print it when I've finished and then read it, but I still don't get I don't catch all of these by any chance.
No, and nobody ever does.
Okay.
Nobody ever does. I mean, there might be somebody that does. I don't. I usually have to come in and get these. I tend to vary on the other side. I tend to have like way too many words in a paragraph. So
well, I cut it down because I cut out all the woulds and coulds and that's and things, and I've tried to really pare it down. So obviously I've probably gone a little bit too far in trying to do it. Now I just need to think a little bit about what to add back in.
Yeah, and within the dialogue tag, I'd worry less about paring it down and more about how does it sound to your ear.
Okay.
And so that goes into what we were talking about like getting a physical manifestation, or like a cheat chart where you can like look at, take a glance and look at the personalities, because it's not just how does it sound to your ear to your mouth, it's how does it sound to your ear to Mariana's mouth.
Yeah.
Right? Like how does that sound for Mariana to be talking? I'd never give Tabiti the word exactly with a period after it. Too excited, too happy to like be around. Right? Like, but it sounds right for Mariana, right? Exactly. Ollie wants you to deal with this. Like, there's that like enthusiasm and excitement around her. I wouldn't give that to Rose either. But this paragraph up here is great for Rose, right? Because like we said earlier, it starts with these statements of empathy, which is, like, I know you, I know who you are, I know how this is. And I'm partnered with you in helping with this. So like those statements of empathy are really great. So yeah, all that to say, it's when you're reading it out loud, make sure you're not listening for your mouth. Make sure you're listening for the character's mouth.
Yeah.
Does it sound like that character? It doesn't sound real. And it might be that, like, you know, Chloe being the more debutante, she may have less transitions and speak more technically.
Okay.
Those are just decisions we make for voices. That being said, you don't want all of your characters to do that because then they all sound the same. But, you know, it's not bad to give to one character. Yeah. Like usually in like a, you know, I'm thinking about like the Batman comics and movies. Alfred, his butler, always speaks like he's writing a technical novel.
It's very English.
Yeah. Yeah. And like very professional, right? Like he's always on professionally, like on professionally. So that's, yeah, that's his, like, you know, he's always the butler. So if you have a character like that, that's always on, giving them that more, like, less transitions, more technical is appropriate. But I'd say for most characters, you want them to sound like someone who is talking. So more transitions, you know, you can overuse some commas a little bit. You know, short sentences with like for an excitable character, short sentences with periods is great. You don't want to give them exclamation points all the time because it makes readers feel like they're just yelling at them. But one every once in a while, like exactly exclamation point, would work here for Mariana. Yeah.
Right.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording and then we can keep talking a little bit more. Thanks for doing this with me.
Not at all. Thank you.
Yeah. That didn't stop.